All right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining the L2 construction series. This is the day 10. As of this time, the participants who have actually joined in this webinar session has reached 350. And as usual, this number will keep on increasing in the first 10 minutes, even when the session has begun. Now, today's topic is weathering the storm of the COVID-19 pandemic. Yesterday, we had Suim sharing with us about what happens after MCO. Now, Hon Leng today, our special guest, will be talking about, from his point of view, the possible ways that you can deal with the COVID-19 pandemic from a legal construction point of view. And of course, Choon Hon Leng is a construction lawyer known in the market and who has a vast experience, who have actually dealt with a lot of projects and landmark buildings in Malaysia. And he's now the head of the construction unit in Raja Darryl and Leong. Now, before we let him begin with his presentation, let Hon Leng perhaps introduce briefly about himself to the audience. Hon Leng, are you here with us today?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Over to you. Over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. And good morning, everyone. Yeah, we have about 400 of us now. Well, I guess that's one of the good things about MCO is that all of us are stuck at home, and I think webinar is the best that we can do. And in fact, I was also talking to Wai Loon this morning. I say that the way it's going, you know, the hotel will be really fearful that nobody is going to rent their conference facility anymore with this successful webinar that I think is going on for every day. And thanks for the great effort. So today I'm going to talk about the issue of weathering the storm, and it has not blown over, of course, and in many places, in fact, in the right midst of it, it's still affecting everybody, affecting you and me, and in fact, the majority of the world. Especially the construction industry is particularly hit hard. It has been, or it's going to be a full 1 month by the time next Tuesday come. We don't know whether it will end. Even if it ends, you know, we are talking about a full 1 month of lockdown. So certainly there will be some great impact on various aspects. Today, what I would like to look at is that where are we now, and where do we stand now, and how do we move forward from here? Maybe I will just start my session. Can I have the next slide, please? Okay, so the MCO has been in place on 18 March 2020. So when is it ending? Nobody knows. But I classify that there's a forced end and the true end. The forced end is when the Prime Minister come out and say that MCO is lifted. The true end is when all the effect actually ceased, and the two are not the same. And in fact, it could drag on for longer. As you can see from the screen, I put this in 5 phases where it starts with, number 1, start of pandemic, which already happened, and that was since last December. I think some of you are already facing these problems in the sense that, for example, if you have procuring machineries or materials from China, the full lockdown in China right after the Chinese New Year. So that already started the effect. We are now into the red zone. I hope we are at the tip of the red zone, which is the actual MCO itself. Then we will have what we call the aftermath of MCO, which yesterday the defense minister come with various variables. That's how this could end. Then after that, it will be the cessation of the pandemic, and ultimately, or the destination is, can we get back to business as usual, the green zone. So now, today, I'm trying to talk about bridging from the red zone to the green zone. How do we bridge this gap? Can I have the next slides? Now, between the gray zone and the green zone, it won't turn on and off like a tap overnight. There will be a lot of lingering effect even after the MCO ended. And in fact, to me, the MCO period is the easier lot. Why? Because everything is frozen. Everybody stops. everybody subject to the same rules and restrictions, what you see is what you get, and everybody knows it. But what is more uncertain is that after the end of the MCO, there will be a lot of gray areas, there will be a lot of uncertainties, and a lot of subjective assessment. And that's where most of the dispute or most of the problems will arise. So that's why at this level or at this stage, what we should be looking at is not just so much as to how MCO is handled. That is still important, but really is how to plan and strategize for and focus on the post-MCO impact so that we will safely navigate that, and then we can arrive at the green zone, business as usual, well, in one piece, you know, so that is the objective. Next slide. So what do we do now? So I classified that, or I split that into three aspects: legal, practical, and operational aspect. Legal aspect, I think all of you would have been very familiar about this by now, and probably would have already done it, in the sense that, number one, you must assess what is this so-called force majeure impact, whether it's MCO or pandemic. What is the impact both upwards and downwards? Upwards and downwards meaning both as you as a customer and you as a service provider, because the two may not be the same and the two may not flow the same. So you have to independently assess that, both as customer and both as service provider. And to be honest, not just about construction contract, it's about every single contract that you have. Your tenancy agreement, you know, even your maintenance agreement, even your office cleaning agreement or whatever. All these contracts, the performance of which will be affected by this MCO. So you need to assess the impact upwards and downwards. Then the next step certainly is to safeguard and enforce whatever contractual rights that you may be able to enforce under the FM. We know that in many of these clauses, you have notice period. Once you breach the notice, there may be an argument to say that you can no longer exercise this, and then the non-performance then become a breach. So therefore, the proper exercise of these contractual rights is also very important. And thirdly, gather and preserve evidence, not now, but not just now, but all the way until your performance resume 100%. So save it somewhere. All this directive or press release, Q&A released by the various government agency, all these restrictions that you have, all this issue of, for example, if you send your guys out to deliver something and then it got blocked by the police, notwithstanding that you may have a lot of authorization, but the police still say, you turn balik, you have to turn back, make sure this is recorded somewhere, because all these are evidence that will need to be used later on if you need to sustain or defend a claim on force majeure. So the next issue, we look at it from a more practical perspective as in the company or the organization itself. Number one, you must start to run simulations and permutations on various scenarios. I mean, your guess is as good as mine as to when this is going to end, whether it's on the 14th, whether it's on the 1st of May, or whenever that is. So, but you must start to run different permutations and simulations, looking at how many projects do you have, which one is on the priority, which one, what stage are you at, what do you need to do. And when you do that, then you will have a more realistic assessment on time or money. How much time do you have? Or how much time can you afford to lose? How much money do you need, actually? Let's be honest, okay? And if need be, you need to have an exit, escape, or mitigation strategy, so that when you are being stretched to a breaking point, and you know where the breaking point is, then you have something in mind. I'm not suggesting to people that now let's try to break contracts and things like that, but there will be a breaking point somewhere, and somehow, if a break is inevitable, then a managed break is certainly better than an abrupt break. Let's put it this way. Next slide. Operational. That means it's internal. This is a time for rationalization and streamlining of resources and operation. Normal days, you will say that it's too busy with projects, too busy with this, too busy with that. Things are running fine. If it ain't broken, then why fix it? Why bother with it? But now the key is that there's nothing else for us to do during this 1 month. So really, it's time to regroup, sit down and see where we are heading as a company, as an organization, as a business entity. We need to subject ourselves to the financial stress test and vulnerability test, because the financial stress is going to get worse, not better. It's going to get worse before there is a hope that it will get better in a few months' time. We need to make some business decisions, whether to downsize, diversify, reorganize, restructure, redeploy, and having better reliance on technology, for example, to provide better certainty, cost cutting. Now, all this to me are plannings that we can do at this stage, even if we are just sitting at home, okay, or working from home. We know what is coming. The MCO is here. The pandemic effect or the post-MCO effect will happen. Whatever is going to happen, the government is not going to say that on 15 April, everything go back to normal, like how it was on 15 January. We all know that that is not going to happen. So therefore, we need to plan. If we fail to plan, that essentially is the plan to fail. Next, we look at some legal aspects or some legal issues. Now, I'm not going to touch so much on the usual FM issues and all these things, which I'm sure that all of you are quite well versed of now. But I would like to look at it from a slightly different perspective and two additional risk assessment. What I call a vertical risk and a horizontal risk. Vertical in the sense that the contract structure, employer, main contractor, contractor, subcontractor, subcontractor, supplier, vendor. So it's vertical. Now, although some will have a force majeure clause that excuse from performance, but let's not forget, number one, they may not flow the same way. So some guy along that contractual hierarchy may not be able to claim force majeure upwards, but being subject to claim force majeure downwards. So he hits both ends. And like it or not, this force majeure or this MCO or even the pandemic has a cost. It's a question of who foot the bill. So you need to identify in your contract structure who is the guy who is going to foot the bill and can that foot by that guy. If the answer is no, then it's going to break. It's just going to break at some stage. Second is what we call a horizontal risk when you measure it against a timeline. So a lot of people are now focusing on MCO. Like I said, I treat MCO as something that is more certain, more in a way black and white, or at least it's black enough to make it black and white. But the pre and the post MCO period is a challenging period. That is the gray period. And when things are uncertain, gray and subjective, more preparation, more thoughts need to be given to that. Now, the next issue, the next slide, we look at the present impact. Surely there will be a cash flow constraint. I think nobody can run away from that. Okay, very simple, no work, no claim, no certification, no payment, no money. And this is going to continue because even if I resume work on 15th of April, I need to do work for 1 month. And then after that, I put in my claim, I get my certification, I get my certificate honored. That whole cycle will take you about 3 to 4 months. Plus the past 1 month or so, we are talking about best case scenario, 4 to 6 months. Worst case scenario, in the sense that what if the MCO got extended, or what if the MCO lifted but not the construction activities are lifted, then we may be looking at even a longer period. When work resume, or when work allowed to resume, I can foresee that there will be a sharp price fluctuations on the 3Ms. The materials will be the one that I feel will be the most volatile, simply because of the disruption to production, supply chain, and international trade. With this, there are a lot of problems with the supply chain in order to meet the sudden surge in demand. So everything gone quiet. Then suddenly everybody say, let's now resume work. Then there'll be a surge in demand when the supply is already down. So therefore, it is important to take this into consideration and prioritize. You need money, of course, to make sure that you allocate your financial resources properly. Otherwise, if everything is ready, but you don't have the materials, how are you going to resume work? Okay, so materials pricing, I feel that that is going to be very volatile. Number two, we are talking about manpower. Certainly, with all these issues going on, you may find difficulties in getting workers, especially foreign workers, for example. But that may be slightly tempered by the fact that people are now fearful of losing their jobs as well. So that is being something that is slightly more neutral, but requires planning. The third one is machineries. Machineries could well be at the other end of the spectrum when there's no point for you to hold too much machineries and not put to good use. So it feels like it will be a buyer or a higher market where prices may be pressed lower because people need liquidity, okay, in order to sustain. So with all these price fluctuations, it will affect how you plan to resume work. That's why I say that you need to run through a financial stress test to see how much financial capability that do you have so that you can prioritize. Now, there is also a high possibility that projects will turn unprofitable or even become a loss-making venture faster than you think. With the already thin margin and with this disruption, with all the outgoings, with no income, things are just going to get worse. So what do you do with that? Do you bite the bullet and just quit? Or do you want to continue to throw what you think are good money at bad money? So certain decisions, certain planning and certain strategizing need to be done. There will be an increased risk of abandonment by owners as well, and also payment default, because like I said, owners get their money from somewhere, and if economies is not picking up, their source of income will also be a problem. And then there will be the cascading effect following from project abandonment. Next slide. Now, with all this impact, when all these things blow over, so what do we see in the aftermath, and how do we connect it back to what we were talking about just now? So number one, I think people will accept that there will be a lot more legal claims. Certainly when times are desperate, everybody needs money, there will be less patience, and then there'll be more aggressive. So the legal claims will increase in number, but I feel that it will actually reduce in terms of the length of the litigation and the depth of the litigation, simply because people do not want to spend that kind of time and money on litigation. Okay, it's on a cut cost drive, so I don't want to spend too much money on my legal expenditure. And certainly, I do not want this to drag on for so long that even if I win, the guy may already go bust by then. I mean, my opponent may not even survive that long. Okay, so with all this in mind, what we look at is a scenario where it's actually cash is king. And because of that, I can see that more settlement will happen, a more generous settlement, if I may say, because thinking of, look, I get 50% now, better than nothing, rather than I hope to recover 100% in 3 years' time, which the guy may not survive that long. So to mitigate credit risk and also to boost cash flow, so settlement will be on the rise. It will also open up a lot of new legal battlegrounds, because this issue on pandemic, MCO, or even force majeure is not something that we have experienced in before, certainly not to this extent. There will be a lot of unknown areas in law or undecided areas in law as far as Malaysian jurisprudence is concerned that a lot of people may want to establish. Now, the key determinant of an effective, what I call effective legal process, depending on which side of the fence that you sit on, is actually speed. Why I highlight speed is because I can also foresee that a lot of this legal action may just end up as time buying exercise, meaning people just want to buy time and just want to drag. Why they want to drag? Why? Because funding may come in later, I need money from elsewhere, or this is just a last claim saloon scenario where I just need to finish that project, get my money out, and then there I go, and I don't care, I'm going to quit. So we can see that litigation, the nature of which will be geared towards that. And with all these things happening, it will have further impact on the ongoing projects. It will create cash constraint, it will create a difficult working relationship, and that again will create another set of problems that we have. The second aspect of the aftermath, next slide please. The second aspect of this aftermath of the storm is that the dip in business for the industry as a whole. It's going to be a trying and challenging time. I think nobody will doubt that statement. I identified three key drivers of what have been driving us along all these years. And I see that somehow this pandemic, whether due to timing or due to nature, somehow have a hand in pushing this down. So first, a lot of the projects in Malaysia are public funded or public infrastructure projects. And this is going to be hit certainly because of government funding. Okay, we know that the deficit will grow because of the stimulus package. Government needs the money to go elsewhere, to directly put it into people's hand, rather than through the industry. Although we all accept that generally speaking, when economy is not good, then construction projects actually is a good stimulus in order to create employment and all these things. But I think based on what we are seeing today, the present situation, that is already too indirect. So government focus now is really directly putting money into people's hands for people to survive. So certainly with that, I think the priority of restarting or launching new mega projects, I think that one will be put at the back burner. And with that, a lot of the contractors will suffer. The second key drivers that we have for the past, say, 20 years is actually housing and commercial development. Now, before we even have this issue of pandemic and MCO and all these things, we know that there's already a property overhang. We know that the economic outlook is not good. We know that FDI, foreign direct investment, are not really pouring in. Now, with all these challenges, this is further complicated by two factors caused by the pandemic. So number one is that due to the pandemic, and if what we read on the newspaper headlines are to be true, that potentially there could be 2 million Malaysians losing their jobs, then there will be a lot of bank defaults. And following from that, there will be a lot of this foreclosure properties flooding the market that will make new property less competitive. And number two is also due to all these uncertainties, people are more cautious in terms of spending. So the new properties and all these things will certainly dip again. So with this, the developers will be taking a very cautious and conservative approach, which again put down the activities or drive down the activities. The third one is oil and gas projects. We are blessed with Petronas, who have been doing very, very well, notwithstanding the challenging conditions. But now with the extraordinary circumstances that we are in, with the pandemic driving down the oil prices, that I was told that in some situations the production cost is substantially higher than even the current oil prices. It's difficult to foresee how Petronas is going to sustain or continue to bankroll the kind of development that we have been seeing. So with these three key drivers all being hit one way or another by the pandemic of COVID-19, it is foreseeable that jobs will start to dry up. That is a very real and scary prospect. Next slide. In the aftermath of this, we will also see, I believe, a reshuffling of the industry. Certainly, I think now it is a survival of the fittest. And of course, deep pockets certainly help, but I think what we should be more concerned with, or the focus should be on the burn rate, not so much of how deep the pocket is. For example, like airlines, they have extremely deep pockets, but the burn rate is so scary that most of them will run out of business in a matter of months if they do not get any bailout or loans. And even as good airline company like SIA, they also need to run to the government. So even though pockets are deep, but because the burn rate is so huge that it becomes unsustainable. So there's no such thing as too big to fail. So certainly cutting or controlling the burn rate in that sense is important. And like I said, in the best case scenario, we are looking at 4 to 6 months, and that is a long time. So with all the rationalization process that we talked about just now, ultimately what will produce is that the key competitors will be the lean and mean machines. Lean and mean is the other way to go. Now, overgrown and overgeared players where they just do the same business model where you use future money to cover present expenses, that kind of model, that model will not be sustainable at all in the present circumstances. But it's a liquidity challenge. But at the other end of the spectrum, for the small timers or for the small traders, it's a question of getting enough work to even make the business have a sense of existence. Is there enough to even make that? If we do not even have enough of the quantity, then we are looking at a non-existent business, and that's why that is the place where a lot of business will also be driven out because of this pandemic. Next slide. In a crisis time, we always say that crisis creates opportunities. So really, this is a time for us to have some self-reflection. How long have we then looked at ourselves and done a self-diagnostic? When things are nice and hunky-dory, nobody will care about all these things. Nobody will look at how much are we spending, how much are we expending, are we doing things right, are we doing things that we're supposed to do? So, but really, this crisis, that opportunity for reflection, since everything is put in the freezer and being paused. The rise of the technology. So as we speak today, we are using the technology. We're making good use of technology to have this. So we can actually cut down on our, for example, seminar budget now for a lot of the companies. If you need to go for conference, just sign up for webinar. Don't need to pay for the expensive hotels. So again, the technology can do a lot of wonders and to help us to cut costs and streamline a lot of the processes. There will be consolidation within the industry and also across trade, where the survival of the fittest, once they survive, then they realize that, look, this is how we have to do it. Consolidate between different players. Almost like the bank, when they have an overlapping, they'll look at a synergistic consolidation. So I can see that happening in the construction industry, especially after the downsizing, especially after cutting off and making yourself lean and mean. Then that becomes a very attractive merger or acquisition proposition or targets. Ultimately, a lot of the bad practices in the industry will also be weed out. Now, so for example, I know that pay when paid is no longer relevant now, but there's no SIPA Act and we still have a pay when paid scenario today, I'm pretty sure that it won't survive because everybody needs money. So I won't believe you that you will pay me when you get paid and things like that. So because of the reality, because of the financial pressure, all this will drive the industry to adopt better practices. Because once bitten, twice shy, so they know it. So they will now driven to better practices to make sure that, in my contract, I need to safeguard myself. I don't just sign blindly because the consequence is going to be grave. So with all this, I say that there are 3 steps that need to do in order for us to weather this storm. First, we need to fully understand the risk. And I emphasize again, the risk here is not just the MCO. It is the post-MCO that could be the more significant and more challenging one to understand. But understanding it and do nothing about it is meaningless. So we need to have a preparation of how do we handle the impact. Everybody will be hit. We will feel the pain somehow. So just how to make sure that it doesn't hit us where it matters, and somehow how do we reduce the pain. And with that, the commitment to implement countermeasures, to put in place the preparation so that we equip ourselves and be in the best position to weather this storm and safely navigate through the amber and the yellow zone. And finally, when the green zone comes, business as usual, we are still there. So that's my presentation for today, for weathering the storm during the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much for everybody.
Thanks a lot, Hon Leng. I have to again thank you for doing this presentation for us. Simply because during this time of MCO, I've been talking to a lot of people. It's not only that I think it's because of the quarantine issue. Your mind tends not to work in the best manner, and you have actually put all the points very succinctly through this presentation. And you have highlighted one important point, is that the MCO period is not really the scariest period because of its certainty. Now, what we actually really have to worry about is what happens after MCO, because it poses a lot of gray areas and a lot of uncertainties, and we must we have to ensure that we ourselves during this MCO period to think and start thinking what kind of steps that we have to take to either reduce the pain and also, most importantly, to survive this period until the pandemic is completely cleared and we reach the green zone, which is the business as usual zone. Now, everybody is not certain, even up to this day, when MCO will be lifted. I can say that there are at least 4 scenarios. First, when it comes to 10th of April, the government will say that the MCO will be extended for another 2 weeks. That is one scenario. Or maybe not 2 weeks. The second scenario will be 1 week, one further week. The third scenario, which is more likely given the news that is coming out lately, especially from the defense minister, it's about the gradual resumption of work. There is no extension, but there will be a gradual relaxation of the MCO, allowing some business to go back to work, and then coming to the point where there will be a new norm of living. Now, the fourth scenario is the full lifting of the MCO, which is unlikely, I think. Now, what is your view on this, Hon Leng? And what are the and if you think that there will be a gradual resumption, whether construction industry would be one of them, that the government will immediately allow them to start working?
Well, I'm looking at, well, I mean, I wish I have a crystal ball, but I don't. I think the MCO may be extended for a week or two. I can see the so-called flattening of the curve. But certainly, you know, now they have some enhanced MCO at certain areas and they need another 10 days to test and all these things. So my feeling is that it probably will drag on for another week or two. The third scenario will kick in, meaning a gradual resumption or gradual relaxation of certain restrictions. And I don't see how construction will fall within that gradual relaxation at the beginning. Because if we look at it, that one of the things that the government has been saying is that, look, we do not want mass gathering of people, and construction site is exactly that. Okay, so it's very difficult to monitor and make sure that everybody try not to gather together, try have, you know, to keep your social distance, you know, and all these things at the construction site. And it's a huge cluster. So if there is an outbreak at one of the sites, we are talking about hundreds of people there that may potentially be infected. So to me, that risk factor is quite high if government is considering of that kind of partial relaxation to allow for construction activities to carry out. Unless they really put their mind to it and start to create a lot of guidelines. For example, you know, at any point in time, no more than 50 workers, you know, and all these things, unless specifically for the construction industry, we have these specific guidelines. Otherwise, on a very general terms, I don't see how that relaxation will benefit the construction industry.
Yeah, Hon Leng, I think the question is not when the MCO ends. It is how should we prepare for the end of the MCO and resumption of life, and not the old and normal life, I suppose.
Yeah, so if we talk about resumption of work, or the MCO is lifted, or at least a partial resumption or something that we can do, I think there are 3 main things that we can focus on. So number 1, get your money ready. I'm serious, get your money ready, okay? You need that. Otherwise, any resumption is just a dream, okay? So get your money ready, and enough money ready. And number 2, I think you need to also make sure that your people, as in your subcontractor, your supplier, your vendor, all those people are ready to resume, because some of them may not. So you need them to be able to support you as well. So you need to be in contact with them, communicate with them, get a commitment from them that they are able to do it. If they say, look, now cannot, I need another 2 weeks, then at least you know. Then you start to plan, how do you accommodate that? So you need that. You cannot say that, hey, look, guys, tomorrow, let's start work. So you just send an email to all your 20 subcontractors or vendors and say, I see you tomorrow, all of you tomorrow at the site. That's not going to happen, okay? So number 3 is that if resumption really happens, then I would strongly suggest a site inspection be carried out, because it has been a month. If it has been left idling, no doubt you're supposed to put in some safety measure before this. But whatever it is, the site has been left idling for so long, so many things could change. We do not want to. We have already enough dispute to argue on. We don't need to dispute on, whether this is pre and post condition of the site. So it would be good and advisable to have a joint site inspection to be carried out to record the state of the site upon resumption of work. These are my three key things that I think people can do or start to plan about it if resumption of work is in the pipeline.
Thank you, Hon Leng. Hon Leng, in recent weeks, we can see that the government has attempted to use both the monetary and fiscal policies as the tools to contain the economic impact. So due to cash flow constraint you just mentioned, like no work, no claim, no certification, no payment, no money, the whole construction industry will see a lack of liquidity, increased funding stress, and companies struggling to roll over existing loans. As the monetary response, banks and financial institutions have come up with financial aid, such as the non-collateral loan and special relief facility at very low interest rate. And on the fiscal side, our government just last week announced a 250 billion economic stimulus package to alleviate the economic blow. And this is on top of the 20 billion stimulus announced earlier. So things are moving in the right direction, and they should be effective in the weeks to come. Do you think we have a good plan in place to weather the storm or to bring us back to the green zone you described?
Okay, there is always this dichotomy or this conceptual debate about should the government help the employer so that employer help to keep jobs and keep the wheels turning, or should the government focus on the employee so that you put money directly into people's hands for them to survive? So of course, the best case scenario is you help both lah, okay? But your resources is limited, so you have to choose. And certainly the last SME package that came out, the 100 billion SME package that came out, will help the construction industry, because the construction industry, a lot of those are also SMEs. So number one, by the salary subsidies, then at least some pressure is off our back. But if we look at it in the longer term and put it back into the construction industry, the help, in my view, may not be sufficient, because now the scheme is such that for 3 months the government will subsidize part of the salary, but then the promise or the consideration for that is that you cannot sack this guy for 6 months. You have to keep them for 6 months. Now, if our projection here is that, look, the cash flow will only start to regularize in 4 to 6 months' time, because like I say, you have no work, you have no claim. You start to do work, do 1 month, claim 1 month, certify 1 month, get paid 1 month. So we're looking at 4 to 6 month cycle. So that means in the first 3 months, you may be relieved, but for the next 3 months, it will still be under extremely heavy financial burden. So that is still a very real challenge that we need to face, you see. So certainly, I think nobody wants to get rid of people or cause people to lose job if they can. But the prolongation of this MCO and the aftermath impact that it has on the industry is really worrying. It's really worrying. And like I said, that is also a problem because of the payment cycle that we are so used to in the construction industry. It's not like you go to the shop, you buy this, and then you pay in cash, and then you get the money, you pay your stuff. It's not like that. Okay, so because of that, that's why we will have significant problem in handling that. The stimulus package certainly helped. Okay, even the earlier the issue on you don't need to pay your loan repayment for 6 months, all those certainly help. And that's why all those need to be taken into account when we do our financial assessment and That's why we need to see what is our worst case scenario. We need to push the boundary so that we know where the breaking point is, so that if we can, we try to avoid that breaking point.
Thanks, Hon Leng. I think on top of that, perhaps in relation to the cash regularization because of the claims submission, followed by the certification, followed by the period of honoring certificates for the works done on site, right? And that would take, as you say, 2 to 3 months, or sometimes even 4 months for the real money to come in. But the thing is that, at this point in time, one of the considerations that they could take now is actually perhaps to advance some money, so that the contractor could actually continue to run the works on site. Taking into consideration there will be ongoing works, right? So then some advance monies would not actually hurt the employers, of course, depending on the projects. Now, the other thing, you are talking about the stimulus package. As you know, that the recent top up on the stimulus to help the SMEs to subsidize the salary for the employees, but the government has made it clear the subsidy for the employee's salary only apply to local workers. As you know, that in construction industry, a lot of the works, we actually use the foreign workers. How is it, actually going to help these contractors or the main contractors in terms of cash flow?
Okay, so foreign workers, let's forget about the real expats. Okay, those you pay a huge sum of money. Let's forget about that first. Okay, they can take the hit. Okay, so if we are talking about our general, workers at site, those general workers. Now, one way to look at this is also this. A lot of those are running on daily wages, on a daily wages basis. So you don't do work, you don't get paid. A lot of them are running on that basis. So no contract, no claim, no pay. So in that sense, the company is not suffering that loss yet, okay? Because you're actually not paying someone who doesn't do work, okay? But the problem is that when you need to resume, you need these people back. And at that time, if you go to your manpower agency and say, look, I need 200 workers for my work resumption next week, what is it going to tell you? Put the money down, okay? Otherwise, I'm not able to supply you. So when you put the money down, what if next week the MCO get extended? Okay, so that's why it's really a gamble. But if you don't do this early enough, and next week really somehow miraculously, now we say that everything back as usual, then you run to him and say that now I need 200 workers. Well, number one, you may not even get it, and number two, the price will certainly be much higher. So with all this in place, that is where I say financial planning to me now is the most crucial part to see how exactly we can make use of limited resources to make sure that we get the max out of it.
Yep, related to that issue about the subsidy, right? Just even assume that the contractors use local workers and they will be able, and they are permanent employees, and they will be able to get some subsidies from the government. Depending on the type of contracts, especially those that is payment or compensation is based on daily works rates, right? If it's contractual, then it's all right. If it's actually, the employer may take the advantage and say that, oh, you have benefited from the subsidies from the government, then there should be a reduction in terms of compensation as well. Yeah, that might also, cause some trouble to the contractors and the subcontractors, despite the fact that is a contract rates already applied. Now, I want to go on to another area, which is, you are from the legal industry, right? Both you and I are construction lawyers. Now, the government has announced a series of stimulus package. Do you think that the government has actually enough of the legal profession in mind, in terms of the stimulus package that has been announced so far?
I don't think so. Because one of the obvious thing that we look at is that, like law firms in Malaysia generally, they are either partnerships or sole proprietor. And that's why when the stimulus was announced, it keeps saying that you have to register with SSM, you keep register with SSM. So the first impression is that law firms are not even qualified for that, to start with, because we are not companies registered with SSM and all these things. So, but I think after that, there's some clarification given, and apparently law firm will still qualify. But I don't think it is geared towards helping the law firm per se. But I can foresee that the law firms and the industry, in that sense, we are in the same boat. And in fact, for all companies, it's the same boat, because at both ends of the spectrum, the bigger but guys is a liquidity challenge. The guy at the bottom is a quantity challenge. So large firms will have a lot of overheads, and all these things. That's why you need more income, because you're burning a lot of cash every day. The burn rate is very high. But the other end of the spectrum, if we are talking about a small firm, a small partnership, one-man show, you can say that, it's very low. But then he still need to eat, you see. So that's why he still need to have enough matters, have enough cases to have enough income to self-sustain. So that's why at both ends, it will be challenging time, although the challenge may be, in that sense, slightly different. One is more on liquidity, one is more on the quantity.
I see. All right. Thank you, Hon Leng. I think we have overrun the session again for about 10 minutes or so. So then, before we end the session, do you have any concluding remarks for our audience today?
Well, I think we are really in difficult time and uncharted territory. Ultimately, the contract is only going to work, okay, if there is a favorable outcome or an outcome to the parties. So why I bring this up is that, sure, the employer can say, hey, there's no FM clause here, so I don't care, this 1 month is your delay, I'm going to charge you LED, okay, I'm going to drive you out of business, I'm going to terminate you, I'm going to get another contractor to come in to rescue the job and back charge you all the differences. But two things here. Number one, getting rid of this contractor will not finish a project by itself. You still need to spend much more money. And number two, recovery will become more difficult because of the present circumstances. Okay, so in view of that, I think that as we move along, people will start to see some common sense in this whole thing. I think good sense will prevail. Eventually, people will be adopting a more commonsensical, a more pragmatic, and a practical approach in dealing with the fallout from this MCO. So like Wai Loon, just now you mentioned a good point that, look, advance payment may be the way to keep the project going, because ultimately we still want the project to finish, so to complete, so that, we can still do whatever you're supposed to with the completed project. So I can see that people will have a bit more, in that sense, sympathy and leniency towards each other, because of the difficult position that not just us, but the entire nation, and in fact the entire world is in. I hope I'm not wrong on that.
Hong Kit, you have anything else?
No, thank you, Hon Leng, for sharing with us as to how to weather the pandemic storm. Thank you again. So it's widely expected there will be a recession in the first half of the year. However, if we plan well, we are able to weather the storm. Once the worst of the pandemic has passed and economies begin to recover, we will once again thrive together. So all thank you for joining us today. Again, a great turnout. If L2 continues to receive this good response, Wai Loon and I may consider doing it after the MCO is lifted. So tomorrow we have not one, not two, but 3 young ladies joining us. They also have some interesting perspectives to share with us. Join us tomorrow to listen to them. Have a nice day. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Hon Leng. Thank you, Hong Kit. And thank you,
Hon Leng. Thank you, Wai Loon.
audience. Again, stay at home and stay safe.